Joining us now, Luis Arriaga. He is the director of Centro Pro for Human Rights in Mexico, and we're happy to welcome you to Canada. How are you tonight?
Very good. Thank you very much, Steve. Thanks for the invitation.
Not at all. Glad you are here. We had on this program a few months ago a professor from the University of Miami named Bruce Bagley, who was here to talk about the U.S. war on drugs, and we talked about Mexico as well in that connection. I want to start by just playing a little piece of tape from that interview, and then we'll talk, okay?
Great.
Roll tape, please, Michael.
The Mexican government simply does not have the institutional capacity. Its tradition of corruption, of weak police force, of weak judiciary, and a hellish prison system have combined to make Mexico the epicenter of drug trafficking into the United States as we speak.
Okay, Luis, let's pick up from there on the issue of drug trafficking and what it has done to human rights in Mexico. What impact do you think the whole drug industry has had on human rights in Mexico?
Well, I think it's very important to say that since Felipe Calderon took place in 2006 as president, yes, there were a lot of military in the streets, and they're fighting against the drug cartels. But this has consequences against the human rights in the population. That human rights violation committed against civilians by military forces has been increased. Just for example, the first semester of 2009, there were committed 119 military abuses. So what happened with those kind of abuses? That go to a military jurisdiction to allow the military forces to judge themselves. So there is a lot of impunity in the human rights violation committed by military forces against civilians.
But the Mexican government considers itself in the middle of a war on drugs and on drug cartels.
Well,
and in any war, there are casualties of war. Now, my question is, do you think the government and the police forces are targeting civilians, or are they kind of accidental casualties of war?
The problem is you cannot say it's casual, or you cannot say collateral damage against the population. We are dealing with a specific person, and the problem is that there's a lot of impunity in the human rights violation. The persons, I mean the soldiers or the policemen who, for example, commit human rights violations such as torture or get in the houses of the persons, they not get any kind of punish. So that is a real problem that we have in Mexico in this war. And the term war is irrational. It is not a correct word to say.
What's a better word?
I say to combat insecurity, and I mean not combat. I mean to take this problem into this responsibility and to conceive security as a human right, to live without fear, without discrimination, with any kind of rights.
Okay.
I mean, you cannot have advance in human rights, violated them. You cannot combat illegality without more violence. So that is a real problem.
Understand. Tell me this. Many people, of course, are trying to leave Mexico because of the violence, and as a result, they try to migrate over the border to the United States or other places.
Or here to Canada.
Or here to Canada, of course. What type of human rights abuses have you discovered as people try to migrate out of Mexico?
Well, there are related cases about corruption, and people who are denouncing corruption in Mexico, they are requesting asylum, or some of them were human rights defender as well, or journalists. There are professional or high risk. So there are people that are requesting asylum in Canada and in the United States or among other countries.
And how does it work? Can you give us an example of how human rights would be abused for people who are trying to get out of Mexico?
Yes, well, there's a lot of, for example, Mexico is a country that receives migrants, a country that migrants go on transit they trying to cross to the United States or even Canada. So there are a lot of kidnappings. For example, every year we have data that are committed more than 10,000 kidnappings of migrants in the Mexican territory.
Kidnapped by whom?
Kidnapped by that organized crime, but in some cases we have cases of collusion between the organized crime and the policemen of some states.
And they're kidnapped for what reason?
To get money. And then there are some of those kind of kidnappings are very quick kidnapping. So they kidnap the migrants and they ask for money, and the family of the migrant may send some money to this organized crime, and then they leave it out.
So the kidnapping usually works. There usually is money that is transferred.
Yes, and the problem is that the state do not have any kind of punish against the people who are corrupted with this organized crime.
So the government is not focused, in your view, on clamping down on this?
Yes, we recently have a hearing before the Inter-American Commission, and hopefully we can have a visit of the president of the Inter-American Commission, and he also is the relative of migrants. So hopefully he can get more information about that and recommend the Mexican state, a thing to do in those kind of issues.
Now, you're in the business, you're a priest,
yes.
But you're also in the business of trying to promote human rights in Mexico and make things better for people.
Yes.
How does the Mexican government treat people like you who are in the human rights business?
Well, there are a lot of in the last years, there were some disqualifications against our work. Not only me as a human rights defender or as a priest and a human rights defender, but also to little small groups who work in the protection of migrants in different parts of the country. For example, we have the case of two priests that have been has been attacked against them by the criminal justice system or the
Attacked how?
They entered to their houses and they said that it was a warrant, but it wasn't a warrant, and stuff like that.
Was this the police who did it?
Yes.
Or the military?
The police.
The police.
In those cases, the police. But we also have another case of...
Now, just before you go on, were the priests in that case harmed?
Yes.
They were harmed. Were they beaten up?
No.
No, so
just threatened.
Threatened, I see.
Yes.
Were they taken away?
Yes.
Put in jail?
No, they didn't put it in jail.
Has anything like that happened to you?
No.
Have you been harassed?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But
no.
is that a concern for people who do what you do?
Well, yes. I think right now in Mexico, being a defender, a human rights defender, or being a reporter or a journalist, those are professions of high risk. And we are very concerned about a lot of cases in different parts of Mexico. They are having a lot of problems on those issues. And what happens if any defender or a journalist have a human rights violations? They don't have access to justice. The Mexican government do not investigate or prosecute the responsible for those kinds of prosecutions.
Now, don't misunderstand this next question, because, you know, even democracies that have been around for a couple of hundred years abuse the civil rights of their people from time to time.
Yeah.
But I want to ask, what kind of history of respecting civil rights is there in Mexico?
Well, that's the problem. You know, NGOs have been increasing because of there is not respect in civil and political rights in Mexico.
There's no history of that?
Yes, sure. A history of very serious violations of human rights. And we recently had this Committee of Human Rights in New York, and there were a lot of recommendations submitted by the experts to Mexico regarding the military abuses, the police abuses, the use of illegal figures such as Arriaga. First I detain you, and then I can investigate you, and a lot of other items.
Now, of course, in the United States, they have 200 and however many years it is now, 240 years or so constitutional history and a Bill of Rights, and in this country we have a constitution and a Charter of Rights. How about in Mexico?
But we also have a good constitution. We also have, I mean, Mexico has been signed almost every kind of protocols, international treaty bodies.
So there's freedom
agreements.
of speech?
Yes, the problem is that those kind of rights do not accomplish in Mexico.
Why not?
Because there is no will to do it in the political action.
The institutions don't support
The
it.
institutions, some of them are very collapsed, such as the criminal justice system.
Okay, let me play. You mentioned journalists a second ago, and I guess we should play this clip right now. This is from a movie called Atenco, Breaking the Siege.
Atenco.
The film documents events in San Salvador Atenco in 2006, and this is the clip showing the experiences of a journalist from the Associated Press who's trying to cover a story. Let's roll this clip if we can.
El día 3 de mayo, la policía golpeó a algunos camarógrafos y fotógrafos que intentaban documentar los enfrentamientos y las aprehensiones.
Habían escaramuzas de ambos lados, piedras de un lado, piedras del otro. Nosotros con un grupo de fotógrafos y camarógrafos estamos al medio de esta situación. La policía detiene a una gente, manifestantes, lo estaban golpeando, nos acercamos a hacer fotografías, entonces empezaron a golpearnos muy agresivamente con los palos y los escudos. Me dieron múltiples agresiones, palos en la espalda, en la cabeza.
Eduardo.
How typical is this?
It's very often. I mean, not only for the journalists. In Atenco, were a very serious human rights violations. We have the case of 11 women who has been tortured and raped by police forces in Atenco during this operative May 2 and 3 and 4 of May 2006. Yes, and there has been no punish. The case is now before the Inter-American Commission, and they are still waiting for justice. So this is a very common situation in Mexico, unfortunately.
I want to sort of come full circle here and finish where we started, which is the war on drugs. Okay, you don't like that expression, but that's what President Calderon is calling it. His war on drugs has resulted in a lot of arrests and a lot of drug lords going to jail or being killed, and the seizure of a lot of drugs and a lot of cash and a lot of arms. They think they're making progress. How do you balance the progress that the government wants to make against these terrible people with the civil rights violations that take place in the main?
The traffic of drugs, there's still a lot of demand of the countries, especially the United States. And there also, we want peace, we want security, but with respect of the human rights of the civilians.
Can you do both?
Yes, I think it's possible.
How do you do it?
With a very specific planning, with a very good proposal based on the human dignity and basics on the human rights treaties.
Okay, but there's very little human dignity and human rights involved in the drug cartels, right?
Yes.
They're all about killing people and making things as crazy as possible.
Yes, but the problem is that sometimes you cannot have all the fault of the organized crime. I mean, the problem is that military policemen are abusing of those kind of powers, and in some towns they are exceptional kind of thing. I mean, you cannot avoid that so easily.
So who has the power to tell the police forces and the military forces that they have to change the way they do business?
Okay, I think the power the Supreme Court. Last year they have the opportunity we do present them a case, but the case didn't pass through because the petition was divided. It was a case of military jurisdiction. What happened when a civilian suffer a human rights violation against before a military force, they get judged in a military jurisdiction. So that is a responsibility of, in one hand, the Supreme Court, but on the other hand, the legislative power and the executive power. So I think that situation must be changed
Understood.
in a short time.
Luis Arriaga, it's good of you to come in and visit us at TVO tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
De nada.